I'm often asked if it was challenging to step up from a training aircraft like a Piper Warrior or a Cessna 172 into a more complex airplane. That's what this is behind me. This is Penny, our 1951 Bonanza 35. You can see she's got the typical V-tail of the 35, really just a beautiful airplane. But there are two elements that are challenging in a more complex airplane. Well, maybe there's more than that, but we're just going to talk about one really. The gear, of course, like gear down, you have to think about that component because it does have complex gear. So retractable gear comes up and down. So that's something you really have to think about. But one of the more challenging pieces with the Bonanza in particular is fuel management. I know it sounds crazy, but let me just show you what this looks like here. So the Bonanza has 4 fuel tanks, or this one in particular does. So the first one you can see here, this is the right main, so it holds 17 gallons. Of course, I have another one on the other side, same deal. This is the left main, holding 17 gallons. But what's different about this plane is that we actually have tip tanks as well. So out here on the wing, you can see we've got another tank here that holds 15 gallons, and then the same thing on the other side here. So, and all in, we hold 64 gallons of usable fuel. So 15 in each tip tank, 17 in each main tank. That's some weird math, I know, but that's 64 gallons. Let me jump in the cockpit and show you how we manage that in flight, because that's kind of where it gets a little tricky and can be challenging if you're not really paying attention. So first and foremost, I have, if you can see down here, I have my fuel selector. So this allows me to select left main or right main. So what's interesting about the Bonanza is it actually returns fuel into the left main at a rate of 10 gallons per hour. So when I'm pumping fuel into the engine for flight and normal operations, it isn't using all of the fuel. So it is actually returning fuel to the left main. So I always want to start with the left, especially if it's full. I want to burn that down so that I have room to put fuel back in that as I'm flying. You're already getting a sense of how this creates complexity. So that's one thing to note. So in cruise, for me, I burn typically about somewhere between 13.5 to 14.5 gallons per hour. So I just have to know and watch that pretty closely. But here's my fuel gauge. I don't have the battery on, so you can't really see it, but this is the fuel gauge. I can see what's in the right tank, what's in the left tank, and then I can go back and look at it in terms of the total fuel I have. And you can see it's a digital readout, but then it actually has the kind of color bars along the side as well. What gets tricky now is I have the tip tanks as well. So the tip tanks, then I have to manage the fuel from those tip tanks and manually move that fuel into the main tanks if I want to use it. So the way I do that are these right here. These are the tip tank pump switches. So they're in the off position now. This is for the left tip tank. This is for the right tip tank. So in flight, after I've burned fuel out of the left main or the right main, and I want to replenish the fuel in those, I have to turn these pumps on and move that fuel from the tip tanks into the main tanks to be usable. So a lot of fuel management happening. The total fuel on board gives me a little over, it's like over 4 hours. It's about 4.5 hours of total flight time. So plenty of fuel on board, but managing that fuel is what becomes critical. Knowing when to switch tanks based upon the fuel burn, knowing when I should replenish the fuel tanks, the main tanks from the tip tanks is another component that you have to stay really close, pay attention to. That's where people get themselves in trouble, is the fuel management. So a lot of you have asked me those types of questions. So I just wanted to show you how you would manage that and stay close to that during flight. Hopefully it gives you a little bit of sense of fuel management in my 1951 Bonanza.